You know that moment, that perfect crystalline moment when everything in your life clicks into place? For me, it was precisely 3:17 p.m. on a Saturday in late June. I was standing under a huge archway woven with white roses and eucalyptus, my brand. New husband, Liam, looking at me like I was the only miracle he'd ever witnessed. The air smelled of expensive perfume and damp earth. We were officially Mr. and Mrs., and then my phone buzzed in the silk pocket of my gown. It wasn't a congratulatory note. It was a text from the son of my boss, a man named Marcus Jr., who was slated to inherit the multi-million-dollar architectural firm I dedicated the last 7 years of my life to. The text was brutal, ice-cold, and read simply, "You're fired. Effective immediately. Consider it my wedding gift to you, *Jane*. My hands started shaking so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. The sheer malice of it, the timing. It was calculated cruelty. I turned to Liam, tears welling up not from the joy of the day, but from the shock of this venomous betrayal. I silently held the screen out to him. He read it, his eyes tracking over the hateful words, and then he did the most unexpected thing. He smiled, a slow, knowing, utterly predatory smile, and I knew, right then, that the story I thought was over had only just begun. The question I'm left with, even now, was what we did next justified, or did we stoop to their level? Tell me if you would have signed the papers. My journey to that perfect wedding day and that shocking text started 7 years prior when I landed my dream job at Sterling & Co., one of the most prestigious architectural firms in the city. I was fresh out of school, bursting with ideas and ready to prove that I belonged. The firm was run by Marcus Sterling SR, a man who was equal parts genius and tyrant. He respected talent, but he demanded absolute, unquestioning loyalty and endless hours. I gave him both. I was an associate architect, but I worked the hours of a partner. I spent countless nights hunched over seedy drawings, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the dream of seeing my designs become real, tangible buildings that scraped the sky. I rose fast. Within 4 years, I was leading major projects, bringing in significant clients, and generally keeping the company afloat, especially on the creative side. But the higher I climbed, the more I clashed with Marcus SR. As son Marcus Jr., Marcus Jr. was the quintessential silver spoon disaster. He was maybe 5 years older than me, but he had the work ethic of a pampered teenager. He was officially the director of business development, which was code for he takes credit for the deals his dad sets up and spends most of the company budget on artisanal coffee and expensive car leases. He resented my success. He hated that I was the one his father relied on for the big, challenging designs. He saw me as a threat to his eventual takeover of the company. He would constantly undermine me in meetings, taking my innovative ideas and twisting them slightly to present as his own. Or, if that failed, he'd simply dismiss them as too ambitious or impractical in front of clients. I tried to rise above it, focusing on my work, but his pettiness was a constant, low-grade infection in the office. The final straw, the thing that gave him the fuel for his ultimate revenge, was Liam. I met Liam a little over 2 years ago. He was the project manager for one of our biggest construction sites, the kind of massive, multi-use complex that would define the city skyline for decades. He was everything Marcus Jr. wasn't, grounded, brilliant, hands-on, and he treated me with genuine respect. We kept our relationship quiet for a long time. Interoffice romances were technically allowed, but I knew Marcus Jr. would use it against me. The moment we announced our engagement a few months before the wedding, the atmosphere in the office turned toxic. Marcus Jr. saw it as the ultimate betrayal. He felt I was choosing a tradesman over the executive class he represented. He started loading my plate with impossible deadlines, openly mocking Liam's profession and company, wide emails he knew I would read, and generally making my life a living hell. His father, Marcus SR, was mostly oblivious, or maybe just unwilling to deal with his son's monstrous behavior. He was focused on his impending retirement and the transfer of power. The wedding day itself was supposed to be the moment I finally shrugged off the stress of Sterling and Co. I'd given my notice a week earlier, intending to take a much-needed break before starting my own small, bespoke firm. The plan was to enjoy 2 blissful weeks in Italy, come back, and launch my business with a clean slate. I'd worked hard, saved meticulously, and was ready for the next chapter. Marcus Jr. accepted my resignation with a snide comment about finding yourself, but I thought that was the end of his nonsense. I was wrong. That text message, sent right after the official ceremony, was his final, spiteful act of power. He wasn't just accepting my resignation. He was unilaterally firing me on my wedding day, a move designed to destroy my confidence and steal my dignity, purely because he could. He wanted me to know that even on my happiest day, he was still in control. I stood there, the expensive lace of my veil suddenly feeling heavy, the joy curdling into a knot of hot, bitter anger. "Liam," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "What does he mean? Why now?" That's when he gave me that smile, that calm, almost frighteningly composed smile. He gently took my hand, his thumb stroking my wedding band, and said, "It means the timing is perfect, my love, just perfect." He didn't seem angry or even surprised. He seemed satisfied. He led me away from the hubbub of the reception and into a small, quiet study that the venue had set aside for us. He sat me down on a velvet couch and looked deep into my eyes. "Jane, do you remember a year ago when Marcus Jr. was bragging about this huge, top-secret project he was managing? The one that was supposed to secure the firm's legacy for the next 20 years. Of course, I remembered. It was the project Marcus Sr. had entrusted to his son to prove he was ready to take over, a multi-billion-dollar private community development called the Pinnacle. Marcus Jr. had kept the plans locked down, treating them like the nuclear launch codes, to prevent me from stealing any of his genius. Well, about 6 months ago, I started seeing the project managers for the Pinnacle on my sites, Liam continued, his voice low and deliberate. They were constantly running into structural problems. The geometry was unsound, the material stresses were wrong for the proposed scale, and the costs were astronomical because the designs were unnecessarily complex and flawed. Basically, the foundation of the whole project was a mess. It was an aesthetic design, Jane, not an engineering one, and I realized why he guarded it so closely. He hadn't just used his father's resources. He'd also cut every corner imaginable, using cheaper subcontractors and materials than the specifications called for, pocketing the difference. He was planning to make a massive, illegal profit before the whole thing inevitably collapsed a few years after it was built. He paused, letting that sink in. My mind was reeling. Marcus Jr. wasn't just a terrible architect. He was a criminal, planning to jeopardize thousands of future residents and destroy his father's firm for a quick, dirty profit. I was furious, a slow, burning rage igniting in my chest. Why didn't you say anything to Marcus Sr. or report him? I demanded. Liam shook his head. Because I knew he would just blame you. He'd say you interfered or tried to sabotage his brilliant vision out of jealousy. I needed something solid, something irrefutable that would also ensure he could never come back. He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a slim, brown leather portfolio. He opened it and slid it toward me. Inside were dozens of documents, engineering reports, materials analyses, and construction contracts, all meticulously organized and flagged. They were the undeniable forensic evidence of Marcus Jr.'s fraud, his gross negligence, and his systematic siphoning of funds. The dates and figures were undeniable. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I was just fired by a cruel, entitled man who had made my life hell and was also a dangerous criminal. I had the means to destroy him and expose a massive life-threatening fraud, all in the palm of my hand. My husband, who had been quietly preparing this evidence for months, was waiting for my direction. Before I tell you what happened next, what choice I made on my wedding day, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let him have his petty victory and moved on? Or would you have used the tools right there in front of you to serve him the coldest, hardest justice imaginable? Let me know. I looked down at the pile of documents, and I looked back at the man I had just married. I saw the same fire in his eyes that was now burning in mine. Marcus Jr. had mistaken my focus on my work for weakness, and my desire for peace for passivity. He thought a text message could ruin my life. He had no idea he was dealing with a united front, two people who had spent months quietly watching him dig his own grave. I picked up a pen from the desk and slid the portfolio back across to Liam. "What's the plan?" I asked, my voice steady, all the tears gone, replaced by steel. Liam's smile widened. The original plan was to let Marcus Sr. retire, let Junior take over, and then, a few weeks later, anonymously send all of this to the board of directors and the city's building and safety commission. It would have collapsed the project, triggered a massive investigation, and financially ruined Marcus Jr. But that text, that timing, it changes things. He pulled out one last document from the portfolio, a simple one-page memo. This is the one-time legal and iron-clad buyout clause for the Sterling & Co. New Ventures Division, which is technically the intellectual property arm that holds the copyrights for all the designs I've ever created. Marcus Jr. didn't know it existed. It was a clever accounting trick Marcus Sr. used years ago. The clause requires an offer to be made within 3 hours of any hostile corporate action against an employee whose designs are currently bringing in over 40% of the firm's revenue. That's you, Jane, and being fired on your wedding day for no cause is definitely a hostile corporate action. Liam reached into the portfolio again and pulled out a checkbook. He had calculated the minimum legal buyout price, which, thanks to all the revenue my old designs were still generating, was still a staggering, but not impossible, sum. We can buy back all your intellectual property, all the designs, all the clients you brought in, all the projects you were working on, for a fraction of what they're worth to the company. We cut the heart out of Sterling & Co. Legally, cleanly, now. He tapped the buyout memo. 3 hours, Jane. We have to have the signed papers in their office before 6:17 p.m., before he has a chance to officially register the firing or bury your files. I didn't hesitate. I scrawled my signature on the memo in a separate check that cleared out a huge chunk of my personal savings, but which was honestly worth every single penny. Liam then made a call. He spoke calmly, concisely, and with authority to his contact, a high-level corporate lawyer who was apparently on stand-by, waiting for this exact moment. Within an hour, a paralegal, dressed in a discreet black suit, arrived at the wedding venue. We finalized the paperwork, the transfer of ownership of the intellectual property that was the real engine of Sterling & Co., and the demand was legally served on the main office via a notary service and secure courier, all before the 6:17 p.m. deadline. Just 3 hours later, as the party was in full swing, and Marcus Jr. was probably celebrating his pathetic victory with a self-satisfied glass of scotch, we had effectively neutered Sterling & Co. He had fired the most creative and profitable person in the firm. We had responded by legally buying and removing her entire body of work, the only thing keeping the firm financially viable. Liam smiled, a real, happy, newlywed smile this time, and kissed me. Now that was a wedding present, he murmured. The aftermath was glorious, though messy. Marcus Jr. called me the next morning, screaming incoherently about theft and corporate espionage. I calmly informed him that his gift of firing me had activated a clause his father must have forgotten about, and that all the intellectual property, the skyscraper designs, the client contracts, the entire portfolio I had built, was legally mine. I had the notarized papers. He had the text message proving the hostile action. Sterling and Co. was immediately thrown into a crisis. Marcus SR, horrified by his son's reckless and expensive act of spite, finally looked into the Pinnacle project, which was now my intellectual property. He saw the disaster and the fraud that Liam had meticulously documented. Marcus Jr. was not just disinherited, he was facing a massive criminal and civil lawsuit. The firm, stripped of its most valuable assets, struggled to stay afloat and was eventually sold off for parts. Liam and I spent our honeymoon doing something much more fulfilling than lying on a beach. We met with potential investors and clients I had already established relationships with. I used my now independent designs, and Liam used his construction and project management expertise to launch our own firm. We called it the Jane and Liam Group. We became an unstoppable team, building ethical, beautiful, and structurally sound buildings, and most importantly, we never looked back. So, was I wrong to use a loophole on my wedding day to destroy the career of the man who tried to ruin my life? I sleep soundly every night knowing I protected my future and also saved thousands of people from living in a structurally compromised building. Like this video if you were on my side. Subscribe for more stories like this of revenge and justice, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I'll see you all in the next story.